This is the eLearning Podcast, episode number 18.
Live online is great. It helps people to, take their face-to-face courses and put them online and react really quickly and survive, I guess, in survival mode. But it's not the ultimate solution that everyone's going to use.
Welcome to the eLearning Podcast from lmspulse.com. My name is Stephen Laddick, and I'm the director at LMS Pulse. My guest for today's episode is John Mitchell. He's the CEO and founder of Arlo. A lifelong technologist and serial entrepreneur, John is a veteran in New Zealand's e-learning space, helping schools and training teams get into the latest in ICT innovations. John is now on a mission to bring Arlo's unique training management system and event software to people and teams around the world. In this truly exciting conversation, we talk about what's it like to deliver e-learning solutions to a world afflicted by the pandemic from New Zealand, one of the bright spots in COVID-19 management and prevention. We also talk about the power of integration in learning and training management systems, which allows Arlo's system to give you the best features the global industry has to offer. We also talk about how to walk the fine line between creating quality educational experiences online and helping educators create enticing marketplace propositions. And finally, we hear John's thoughts on the future of training management systems and why empowering learners is still a foolproof strategy for retention and sustainability in the business. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsors.
The eLearning Podcast is sponsored by the eLearning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hello, John. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Stephen. Good to be here.
John, where do we find you sitting in the world today?
We find me in Wellington, New Zealand, and it's a stormy day outside. There's a lot of wind. In fact, I love the wind. I'm a windsurfer, so yeah, it's a good day for me. Yeah, but very stormy for others.
Fantastic. I actually drove through Wellington in December. We did the RV trip around the South Island there. Super fantastic stuff.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah.
I love it down there. I'm really excited to ask you my next question because I've asked this to everybody on the show right now. We're recording this in September, it's September 10th, kind of at the top of the month here. What's your COVID been like?
Our COVID been like? Well, I think in general, we've done okay. I think we've made some good decisions from a government point of view, and we had some lockdowns, but we've been able to get out of the lockdown. So yeah, in general, it's been good from that perspective, from a social perspective. Of course, a lot of companies have found it difficult, and we really empathise with those people. But no, I think we've been okay in New Zealand.
I'm sitting here in the United States right now. I mean, in desperate envy of how you guys have handled it and how it's played out. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Look, there's some challenges in Auckland, but that's just recent. But no, I think we're pretty happy with how things have gone. And in that respect, in terms of our ability to live our lives as normal, I guess. We did have a period of lockdown for about 4 weeks, but we've got out of that. So yeah. Perfect.
You are the founder of a company called Arlo, and I don't want to steal your thunder. Sorry, not your form, because it's so stormy outside, right? So tell me about Arlo. Tell me about give me the Arlo story about what you do, where you came from, and how you serve the EdTech community.
Yeah, look, it happened a while ago now. Actually, it was about over 12 years ago, and I was part of a project, and in that project we needed to train a whole bunch of teachers throughout New Zealand. So they were implementing a new piece of software for all the schools. And so we had literally thousands of teachers that we needed to train. And we needed a way to do it. And we couldn't do face-to-face training. So bear in mind, this was about 2007. So in that context. And what we saw was this ability to do live online training, webinar style training. So I guess the short story was that we built a scheduling tool to manage all the logistics around managing those sessions and coordinating all that live online training with the teachers. And it was really successful. It was a really effective way of training the teachers. But what a contrast to now. I mean, and the technology that we used back then was just completely different to what now. But yeah, but in terms of how the company started, that was the initial start of the business. And then once we sort of got into a bit deeper and we talked to some training providers who are commercially selling training, and discussed about delivering live online training. In fact, at the time, the market really wasn't ready for it. Like I said, the technology was quite difficult to use. It was effective to train those teachers, but it was quite cumbersome. And so looking at those training providers and asking them what are the challenges they faced as a business, we sort of realized that it was more than just the scheduling that had them with difficulties or the difficulties they faced. It was to do with marketing their courses, selling their courses on their website, taking payment, and a whole lot of other aspects of running a training operation, a commercial training business. And I guess that's where we are now. That's the process that we've come from basically the scheduling component to a full integrated solution for running a training business, managing all aspects from your website, your payments, your registrations, right through.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
I love the all-in-one box solution. So do you come from the tech side? Do you come from the business side? Do you come from the training side, the education side?
Yeah, a little bit of everything really. I guess my background is marketing, so more marketing, but I like the technology. So I've enjoyed being part of the process of building the technology as well as I guess marketing and selling it. So a bit of everything really.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, what I love about the way we're starting this right now is that you have used the word training, right? You've used the word trainer, and so in your mind, who is that? The people who are listening right now are professors at higher education institutions. They are people who are working in learning and development departments in organizations. Who do you when you say a trainer, does that mean everyone, or are you like most?
That's really, yeah, Stephen, that's a really good question because there's so many systems out in the marketplace, so many LMSs, so many training systems, and so we're really focused, and we're focused on businesses who sell training commercially. So for example, the verticals are the likes of health and safety providers, teacher professional development, lawyers, accountants. So I guess one key area of that is people who have to do training as part of their profession. So a teacher has to do a certain amount of PD to be able to maintain their qualifications, to be able to be a teacher, just as an accountant needs to keep pace with what's going on in the legal world and the political world. And so our customers, the training providers, are people who target those sort of individuals where their training is a requirement of their profession, but where they are actually going to external people to, I guess, receive that training, as opposed to a system that's designed for staff training, like an L&D system where you've got a learning and development manager. Another example of our client base is universities, but actually not universities in the context of tertiary providers, so degree-based providers, but actually most universities will have short course program for corporates, which are accountants, lawyers, leaders, and within business and so forth. So they're doing short courses, and again, they're selling those courses, and they're really transactional. So that gives you an idea of the sort of customers that we target, and the problems that we solve for them is those commercial problems of taking payment, making that registration process nice and easy, as opposed to, say, a learning development manager who has a more intimate relationship with the learners themselves, the staff members, and their growth and their career, I guess.
I'm really glad that you broke that down, because so often, especially around the world, with the COVID crisis, there's been such a focus on, your typical sort of either K through 12 or higher education teacher. This is a different sort of wheelhouse that we're looking at, and I love it. Speaking of which, I'm going to take a guess, but has the crisis had that inverse relationship on your training providers, where they've just sort of been drinking from a fire hose, as I like to say, and just tons of client, or did it disrupt that business as well?
Well, major disruption, really, because when you look at the sort of training that our customers are doing, it's primarily face-to-face. Well, it was, and I guess we're going to talk about the changes. Yeah. So, teacher training, teacher PD is primarily, going on site or going off site to a particular, another location with a group of people together. The same with accounting, big law firms like PwC, Thomson Reuters, there are a lot of our clients, they deliver training, and of course they do it in the context of either their own offices or go out to people's locations and do it on their site when there's a group of accountants and an accounting firm, as an example. So anyway, the point has been that it's face to face, and that has been the cornerstone of Arlo for many years. We've built out the other delivery methods, but as soon as COVID hit, you've got this lockdown and people can't travel. And initially it was just, well, it might only be a short amount of time, and then that one day led to another day, to a week, to a month, and so our customers really had to pivot very quickly, or the ones that did pivot very quickly succeeded, and recognizing that, hey, this face-to-face game is not going to continue, or it's going to be shut down for a long period of time potentially, and so they jumped on live online training. Call a lot of different things, don't we? We call it virtual classrooms,
sure, remote learning, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
webinars, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that was really what everyone pivoted to, and our sales, or the registrations that our customers had, just went through the roof. So there was, I think, within March to February, about 280% increase just in live online registrations. Wow. And that was just a start to it. I think some of the stats were like 12,000 registrations in 1 week compared to 1,500 registrations the same period a month before. 12 times the growth per annum. Just read through the roof. And, well, there was no other option really.
Sure.
I mean, what are you going to do? You can't do face to face. So the only option is live online. And I think there's a lot of combinations that have also played a part in making that successful transition, right? So, I talk about that time when we're training the teachers. That was just crazy. Very few had cameras. Basically, the only people that had cameras was the trainers themselves. The audio was not over the internet because the internet wasn't fast enough. It had to be over audio conferencing, and you had to pay per minute. It was ridiculous, right? So, but you fast forward to now, and now, thankfully that investment in internet that the governments have put into that network around the world just paid off big time. You've got super fast internet connection. You've got people who are more familiar with cameras and been in front of cameras. I mean, that whole growth in Zoom was just amazing, wasn't it? Where, families and friends just jumped onto Zoom. And that really played a massive part in, I guess, the adoption of that technology, because people were comfortable talking to each other on on a computer with a camera. They had the speed to do it, and the cost was basically free. You would never think about that in the past, but it was free. So I think all those things really played a big part in just the significant pivot and the speed at which that pivot happened in a short space of time.
So you said that there were some that were able to recognize it was going to take a while and they pivoted. What were the other factors besides the underlying infrastructure that they could use? Did they say, look, we know that we're, what we usually do live in person, we can adapt that to, sort of having PowerPoint? Like, were they able to actually put some instructional design behind it? Or was it, they were just the ones that were first to market and sort of reproducing their live training online kind of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think there's probably a few combinations going on there. Some people had subject material that was easy to convert, right? That was really theoretical. It was PowerPoint presentations in a classroom environment that you could quite easily transfer. Others, where you're doing, a first aid course and you can't exactly throw a mannequin down the camera, and practice CPR. So some of them just had a natural. It was a lot easier to convert those courses.
Sure, software training or those kinds of things. That's it just makes a lot of sense, right? But yeah,
just straight up, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think there's others that had previous experience running, a few webinars that already touched on. I think one of us, there's a number of our customers who were already doing it, so it was just a case of sort of dialing it up But most of them that really pivoted fast just recognized they had to. There was no choice. So even if the course material wasn't really ready, they had a schedule of courses, for the next few months that was, dollars to them that they just needed to do something, or else their revenue stream would be dry up. And also those learners themselves had to do something. They had to like I said, most of those professions needed to keep on learning for part of their job, right? So yeah, that was another another factor in that whole process. Just the fact that people just sort of thought, wow, look, we haven't had much experience, but I'm just going to jump into the deep end here and learn as we go. And so I think that's what happened. I reckon if you talk to a lot of those people, or if you sat in a lot of that training, you would see a massive improvement from the first webinar you did to now. In fact, we've got we posted a number of blog articles. Say, I think technical tips for hosting a webinar is one of our most viewed pages on our website. The ultimate guide to blended learning, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. That again has been read by thousands of people. So I think there was lots of tips to help those people, I guess, improve the delivery over time.
I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that Arlo's business kind of you've got a lot of business in New Zealand, but you probably reach up to Australia and then you reach out Southeast Asia. Are you truly global? You're reaching America?
It's interesting actually. I think we obviously New Zealand's a small little country in the middle of nowhere, really down south for most people. Look, I think it's about 80% of our customer base is worldwide. So we're in about 70 countries, more now actually. We're really not a New Zealand company in terms of our customer
base.
Great.
The reason why I ask is I'm wondering if you saw a different response globally from different customer bases or different places that recognize differently or were able to adapt, or do you have any kind of data like that?
Yeah, I don't actually. You caught me out on that one. I'm just trying to think. I think Australia did pretty well from memory, and New Zealand, but I don't think there was a major. It was just a major shift across the board, right?
I guess it's those who saw that they needed to innovate and adapt. That I guess they did. I just wondered, it kind of sparked that interest of, were there differences in maybe cultural differences or market differences in their ability to make that pivot? Because as we've seen over the past 12 years, some people they demand that face-to-face piece. Some people are just so ready to do online or mobile, that kind of thing. So I
think there was more probably in New Zealand and Australia, but bearing in mind they're only a small little part of our customer base, and we're quite we like to think we're ahead in technology and forward thinking. And I think there's probably a bit of an element of truth to that. You've got to be quite agile and nimble to survive when you're a small country in the middle, down in the bottom of the world. And then so, our users tend to be a little bit more savvy because you just have to be to compete. But I think that's a minor point just to.
So speaking of those who did innovate, what have either you learned, or in your blog posts and the stuff that you're putting out there, what are you recommending to trainers, especially in this industry, about how to not only survive right now, but future-proof yourself, against future disruptions like this, and now what is essentially the new normal?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few pieces to discuss out of that in terms of what the future is. I think we could talk about how live online really is just the tip of the iceberg, or it's probably not the right word for it, but it's just an element now, right? So probably talk about that a little bit, and that, live online is great. It helped people to, take their face-to-face courses and put them online and react really quickly and survive, I guess, in survival mode. But it's not the ultimate solution that everyone's going to use, right? I think e-learning is really important as well. And I think a lot of these commercial training providers recognize that, hey, we can convert some of that content into e-learning material, and that can be an effective way of, I guess, disseminating knowledge and training people. And then, and again, that wasn't really new, just as webinars aren't new. There's a real catalyst. There's a point where people had to make a change, and I think that's what's happened there. So it's just accelerated the need. So what we're seeing here is companies clearly pivoting to live online. They're clearly now seeing, okay, e-learning is something we need to get into. We need to take some of our material, convert it into nice, easy modules that people can do online. And of course, in the business decision-making process, they probably had that in the back burner. They probably already were going to create some e-learning content, But now, of course, it's just like, the boards of these companies say, look, we've got to do it now. Money goes into it and it happens quickly as opposed to sort of a slow process. And I guess the other big changes we're seeing is that there's a real spark in blended learning, where really none of these delivery methods, whether it's classroom, whether it's live online, whether it's e-learning, are effective all the time. And in fact, if you utilize those different delivery methods and you combine them into a course, it can be really a powerful learning experience and can be really effective in terms of teaching people, but also very efficient in terms of teaching people. So, whereas you do to have a classroom course of a couple of days, right? Everyone came to the classroom and learnt in front of with a group of people with a projector and so forth. You're now splitting it up. So the theoretical part of that learning experience can be done in isolation leading up to that classroom course. And that's done through e-learning, right? Some modules from e-learning. And then you can have the session, the training session in the classroom still, because maybe you still need to do that CPR for a first aid course, but all the theoretical sort of elements of that first aid course can be done prior. And then afterwards, you can then have follow-up sessions, say webinar sessions where you're talking with a group. And I guess we haven't talked about that, but that whole ability to learn from one another and extend that learning experience beyond the course. So I think what we're seeing in the future of learning is acceleration of these technologies, so more adoption of these different delivery methods, but also leveraging the best out of each of them and combining it into a course that ultimately delivers a better learning experience and a more efficient learning experience. And so the training providers are able to, I guess, from their side, they're wanting to make more money. We're all in the business of, in most cases, for training businesses to generate more revenue. So they're able to take a course, split it up. There's investment in the e-learning component of it. But once they've invested, they can reuse it. So a course that they were selling for, $2,000 for a 2-day course, they had to have the logistics of paying for that presenter or the trainer for 2 days. Now that can be split down into a day maybe. Sure. And they can have the material that the actual learner's going through can be done in advance, the sessions. So ultimately the costs of running that course actually come down. You've got 1 day instead of 2 days. But they can still charge the same, if not more, because the learning value that you're delivering.
The value is still there. It's just your fixed costs are going down. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's the I guess the pedagogy side of the learning, but in the future proofing question. The other thing is just the logistics, and we've been really fortunate. I do empathise with the businesses who haven't been successful with COVID, have really struggled, and there's a lot of people who are suffering as a result of that from a commercial point of view, from a personal point of view. So I really do empathise with them. In terms of our side of the things, we have been fortunate in that the demand for a training system has really grown, and training businesses are recognising that, hey, we need a shift in the way we deliver training, so we need a system that supports that. But we also need to have a system that's efficient, logistical wise. Managing scheduling of courses needs to be efficient. Managing the payment and passing it through the accounting system needs to be efficient. It's no longer a database that someone's created or a spreadsheet they've been using for managing these registrations and payments. They need something that's really efficient, that's going to allow them to easily, schedule lots of courses and manage it with, say, one person as an administrator.
Before you take me there, because I know that there's a big piece that we want to talk about exactly how the Arlo system works. But something that struck me about what you were just talking earlier is kind of that third part of the training piece where it's, come in and take the training, and, you have some efficiencies you've created with, you're calling them e-learning, and blending that with sort of live stuff as well. But then there's a community component. Are you seeing that even in these professional development pieces where, like, the webinar afterwards, or maybe it's a private group or something, has that become like something people are really kind of craving as well?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it wasn't a setup question too. It's a good question. So yeah, it's a real good example of that. one of our sales managers went on a course, a sales management course, a SaaS sales management course, and yeah, he got a lot out of it. It was a 2-day course. This is pre-COVID. But the real value he's got out of that course wasn't the course itself, was the fact that he got connected with sales managers who are from SaaS companies, software as a service, so software companies essentially, globally. And now on a weekly basis, they get together and they have forums and ask questions, and it's just been invaluable. So yeah, it's really interesting that, that it wasn't the course that was the real value, although that in itself did give them some good insights and good ideas. It was that connection to that wider group, and then the fact that that group had a platform for collaboration and communicating with each other, a forum and discussion forum, which was really the value of that course. So yeah, that's something I think we're going to see more of, definitely.
That's fantastic. So
Yeah.
take our conversation. There's some really exciting stuff that Arlo itself as a platform have been rolling out recently, and I know that we wanted to speak specifically about just integrating the whole thing. So you touched on it at the very beginning, but I wanted to kind of revisit it really quick, because I don't think that the power, you didn't really sort of hit me with the whole power. Like, if I'm a training provider, just the logistics is a big piece. But then when you throw in, how do I take payments? How do I make sure those payments happen? How do I give people receipts? Then how do I do certifications at the end? That's all built into your system, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Anyone who's really been involved in training knows that it's actually a real just logistical nightmare. It's pretty, if a person turns up and they're at the wrong location at the wrong time, it's a real problem. They've probably traveled over the city to get to that place and no one's there. So, the whole logistics of running face-to-face training, it can be really a nightmare. But also the other elements of it, when you do things like course changes and making sure that they're kept informed, but then when you do cancellations and transfers, making sure that if you do a transfer or a cancellation as an example, that's not just a cancellation of that registration, but that's also raising a credit note in the accounting system and doing a refund. So there's a lot of complexity around, changing course registrations, around those. If they're transferring to another course, is it a different price? Is there a refund, or do they have to pay more? All those commercial elements of managing, the logistical elements of transfers and cancellations. So yeah.
And so, there's got to be at some point Arlo ends and that you connect to other services as well. I mean, there's just so much out there that people are using these days. There's Slack, there is Microsoft Teams, there are other web services and whatnot. How do you integrate with maybe either other learning management systems or accounting systems or whatever? Like, take me through how do you integrate with other systems?
Yeah, it's so key, isn't it? There's so much good software out there, and you can't do everything. You can't do everything well, I think is the main thing. You can try and do everything, but you'll invariably fall over at some point, because there's just specialist skills and specialist technology in certain areas. Like, we can't be an accounting system, which is pretty obvious, really. So we've got to integrate with that. So we've got some native integrations with key applications. So that's where our system integrates directly with another system, and we've built the integration. We've got the code in our application. So things like Salesforce, Moodle as an LMS, we've got really deep integration with that. Xero. So those systems we've spent a lot of time in integrating. But what's really exciting is that we've just launched Zapier, and this is something that's really new in the marketplace. They've been around, but I guess when I say new, I mean it's starting to become really relevant. So it's probably the better description. It's really relevant.
I know what Zapier is, or Zap.
Yep.
Some people call it Zapier, some people call it Zapier.
We
should probably dial them up. We don't know. It's that you do Zap.
Zap, yeah.
Yeah, give me a high level for those people who don't know. What is Zapier in the first place?
Yeah, okay. So you've got lots of different applications. You talked about a couple. You talked about Slack. You talked about Microsoft Teams. So there's heaps of applications out there. And rather than wait for us to build that integration, which I tell you is expensive and takes a long time and is a nightmare to get there, it's really expensive. What you've got with Zapier is that this ability to integrate with other applications, a piece of or a platform in the middle. They call it middleware technically, and where we've integrated with Zapier and other providers like Slack have also integrated with Zapier. So they're the person in the middle, and we're able to, or the user's able to go into Zapier, and set up that integration themselves. So essentially what it means is we integrated with Zapier, and now we effectively have integration with 2,000 plus other applications.
That's awesome.
Right? So it's awesome. And what's really cool about it is that you don't need to be a developer or a coder. The person who's connecting those two systems. So for example, say Slack, you want a notification. So when a course is created or changed, a message goes to a Slack group or a Microsoft Teams. You don't need to be a developer to be able to set that integration up. And in fact, not only that, us as providers and other users of Zapier have potentially already created that, they call it a Zap, I think you mentioned that, where the idea or the integration itself has been already configured, so you can just implement that Zap. And like I said, but even if you don't have that Zap available, you can create a new one without any code. So it's really cool stuff. So, things like SMS and text messaging, we don't need to integrate that with a platform like that. It's already a platform provider or providers on Zapier. We've already got a Zap that you can just plug in and turn on. It goes straight away. But other things like campaign tools like MailChimp, Campaign Monitor. I mean, just basically any piece of software that's really targeted global market and it's got scale will be on Zapier. What are some other things? Like if you just want to get the registrants from a course into a Google Doc and you just wanted to automatically create the Google Doc and then append the sheet, you can do that. Say integration with Microsoft 365 or Google Calendar. Again, that's possible. Marketing automation tools. That's really big, I think, in the world of promoting courses.
Absolutely.
So of course that's HubSpot is a big one there. Marketo is another big one. So again, those sort of things would have taken a company like us a long time, potentially, or a lot of investment to integrate natively. Just with that one integration with Zapier, we open ourselves up and our clients to be able to use all those tools and to do so really quickly. So it's really cool stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like a fantastic way to scale your business too. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So something that I like to sort of end each of these conversations with a final question about the future. Essentially, I mean, here you are. You were already well placed for this crisis to happen, but you've not only weathered it, but you've helped your clients weather it, and now you've got these great integrations going on. What do you see coming down the pipe in 6 months to a year? Is training fundamentally changing? Are people going back to face-to-face? Is blended just everybody's going to choose that? Are we going to do everything on a mobile device? Like what's your vision for what's going to happen?
I think, it's the question that everyone wants to ask. It's a key question. I think there's just naturally courses that have to have social interaction or physical interaction, and those ones you can't change. They're always going to be done in the classroom. But like I said, I think blended's going to play a big part in splitting up the pieces of learning so that when you're actually in a face-to-face environment, you're really just teaching the learning or the pedagogy is around just purely the interactive elements of a course. So I think that's going to be quite key. One thing I'm really excited about, and it's not probably going to be 6 to 12 months, it's later, it's a bit further on in terms of mainstream, is VR or virtual reality. That is cool. That's definitely, when it comes to certain industry, that's going to be a game changer. So for example, health and safety, where you've got people who are climbing on scaffolding around buildings. And so part of the courses they deliver is working with heights. It's an actual course qualification. Where you need to, climb around scaffolding, you've got to do things like check your harness, right? So you're looking at your harness, and it's interesting. When you get into it, it's quite interesting.
Well, before you go down there, one of the things that blows my mind that I get so often, you don't have these conversations if you're not in that industry, right? If you're not building sky rises, you're just never on scaffolding. But of course, as soon as you say it, you have to train people how to get used to this. And so putting out harness, clipping in, making sure that when you move, you've got all your tools like actually attached to you. These kinds of things are all critical pieces of information.
Well, actually, I could tell you the specifics. You know, when you check a harness, you've got to make sure its label was the most recent. You know, it's got a certification is recent and valid. You got to make sure there's no threads there hanging off. That could show that the harness has been damaged at all. There's a whole lot of pieces just before you put that harness on. And what's cool about VR is that you can do it within that environment. You don't need a harness.
Mm-hmm.
You can build it all into the experience. And then, of course, walking on the scaffolding, when you're walking on scaffolding, you've got to clip into the line. So you've got to make sure you're always clipped at any time. And so you can simulate that in a very realistic environment with VR. Even working in heights, you really get. Have you tried VR actually?
I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old son. You cannot be. You cannot not have that conversation.
Yeah. Have you got one of those Oculus Quest?
Well, this is the thing. So my next question for you is, who are you going to pay attention to? Is it Oculus? Is it PlayStation? Is it Xbox? Is it Epic Games? Who's going to crack this nut in a way that makes VR truly accessible and truly, something that just, today anybody can go on and create a course and we can all use PowerPoint. Who's going to be able to use VR? Who's going to crack that for VR?
Yeah, I think the one that's leading at the moment is Oculus Quest from Facebook. But I imagine there's other headsets. But the big change in VR is that, and Oculus Quest has got it out there, and I'm not too familiar, but I'm sure the other ones will follow pretty quickly, is that they've built everything into that headset, right? So whereas previously you had to have a
game changer, absolute game changer.
Game changer. Previously you had to have a computer, and you had to plug your headset into that computer. So, of course, you had the massive expense of the computer. You had cables and everything around your head. Oculus Quest came out, and it's basically all in the one device. It's relatively cheap. It's about $700. When you think of a mobile device, a mobile phone, it's now accessible. I think Oculus Quest is the one that's leading at the moment. But I hope that other ones catch up, and I'm sure they will. And I hope it gets to a point where you've got mobile devices. You've got lots of different platforms, whether it's a gaming platform, Xbox, or, PlayStation, mobile, whether it's Android or Apple, and all the different names. Hopefully we'll get to a point where it's, it doesn't matter the hardware, it's the content and, these simulations and making them really effective that counts. Because it's pretty cool technology. Yeah, there's some
fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other things, like we talk about that working in heights where you're clipping yourself in, but other things out there where you fall off, you actually fall off and you get an experience that's pretty scary, So there's but other things like if you've got to learn video, so if you've got to watch some videos, right? Mm-hmm. They can embed them inside the actual course, so that when you're looking at the building you're about to climb up, you've got this big screen, a video playing of something you've got to learn about, then you've got on another wall, you've got, say, a set of questions, and it's your quiz, right? To whether you've checked the harness right. There's some really good stuff. So, but I think there's going to be some time for that content to be produced, to be cost effective in producing it, the adoption of headsets, and so forth. So I think there's still a bit of time there. And, we're keen to, when we talk about blended, I think that's just another delivery method to add into the mix, right? So there's going to be e-learning, there's going to be webinars, as we talked about, live online, classroom, and VR. And they'll all be combined into creating a really good experience, using the best of all those technologies. Yeah.
John, this has been absolutely fantastic conversation. I really appreciate learning about Arlo and, what your experience has been during the COVID and how, trainers are adapting and pivoting. I hope that we get to talk again, maybe in 6 months or a year and see how that VR dream is playing out. But thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you've learned today in this episode, I encourage you to either follow us or subscribe to us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And please do share this episode with one or two of your colleagues or friends. Also, I just want to remind you that you can level up your online learning game with all of the information that's available at the eLearning Success Summit. You can get your free ticket at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And finally, You can also stay up to date on everything that's important, all the news and the resources for e-learning professionals at lmspulse.com. Get our free newsletter by just going to lmspulse.com today. Thanks again.